Everybody, how's it going? My name is Mr. Gregory. I think I met most of you the day before we left for quarantine, but if not, this is our introduction. I'm sorry that we haven't had the chance in class to do things together. It's just the nature of this pandemic and the way that we have to do things going forward. So, given that I have to assign you things from home, I want to make it as simple as possible. So, what I'm going to do is give you an essential question. And the essential question is the whole focus of what you're looking at. And then I'm going to go through the documents that I provided on Google Classroom with you. And then when that's done, I just want you to answer the essential question in 14 to 20 sentences. And that'll be due next Tuesday. You can email me. My email is james.gregory@lausd.net if you have any questions. Otherwise, turn the assignment in through Google Classroom. And I look forward to reading what you guys write. It's a real shame we can't interact in the traditional way, but this is just the way it's got to be. So our question is, what caused the Salem witch crisis of 1692? Now, before we get into any background, I have some background for you that I provided. If you look at the document that I provided you on Google Classroom, the very first page says Salem Witch Crisis Summary, and I'm going to read that with you now. If you want to have it on the side or you want to just listen, I'll put it up here on the screen, but I'm going to read that with you now. Salem Witch Crisis Summary. The Salem witchcraft crisis began during the winter of 1691 to 1692 in Salem Village, Massachusetts, when Betty Paris, the 9-year-old daughter of the village's minister Samuel Paris, and his niece Abigail Williams, fell strangely ill. The girls complained of pinching, prickling sensations, knife-like pains, and the feeling of being choked. In the weeks that followed, 3 more girls showed similar symptoms. Reverend Paris and several doctors began to suspect that witchcraft was responsible for the girls' behavior. They pressed the girls to name the witches who were tormenting them. The girls named 3 women, who were then arrested. The third accused was Paris's Indian slave Tituba. Under examination, Tituba confessed to being a witch and testified that 4 women and a man were causing the girls' illness. The girls continued to accuse people of witchcraft, including some respectable church members. The new accused witches joined Tituba and 2 other women in jail. The accused faced a difficult situation. If they confessed to witchcraft, they could escape death, but would have to provide details of their crimes and the names of other participants. On the other hand, it was very difficult to prove one's innocence. The Puritans believed that witches knew magic and could send spirits to torture people. However, the visions of torture could only be seen by the victims. The afflicted girls and women were often kept in the courtroom as evidence while the accused were examined. If they screamed and claimed that the accused witch was torturing them, the judge would have to believe their visions, even if the accused witch was not doing anything visible to the girls. Between June and October of 1692, 20 people were convicted of witchcraft and killed, and more than 100 suspected witches remained in jail. You've got to understand a little bit about the people who live in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1690s. They came over from England because they weren't allowed to practice their religion in England anymore. These people are known as the Puritans. And the Puritans have a very strict view of the Bible. Whatever's in the Bible is literal. It's exactly what happened. And as I told some of you when I saw you last week, one of the passages of the Bible says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." And so Puritans believed that any notion of witchcraft, anything that seemed ungodly, was to be punished. And so they killed 20 to 21 people, all of them either hanged by the noose, or one, as I told you guys in class, was pressed to death, meaning they put stones on him until his chest cavity imploded. And it's a time of mass hysteria. And you're sort of living in a time of not maybe mass hysteria, but close to it in the way that everybody's reacting to this coronavirus. There is a certain sense of hysteria. People are worried, so they're buying lots of toilet paper. I'm not quite sure how that adds up. People are probably using the same amount of toilet paper as they were before, but the point is people aren't acting logically. They're hysterical. They are crazy, maniacal on some level. And this all happens because 4 young girls said that they were being haunted by the specter or spirit of a witch. And they would blame people in the town, and then those people had a choice. You either say you're innocent, and then usually those people were killed, or you said you were guilty, then you ratted other people out, and then they'd put you in jail where you might die, but you were certainly, not treated well. And so the question we want to figure out is, what caused all this? What caused these girls to do this? What was behind it? So what I want you to do is turn to document A, which is the next page on the document there, and you'll see Salem Evidence A. That's what I want you to look at. Discourse on Witchcraft. In the speech below, Cotton Mather, an influential leader of the Puritans, argues for the existence of witchcraft. All right, so let's see what he has to say. I will prove that witchcraft exists. Those who deny it exists argue that they never saw any witches. Therefore, there are none. That would be as if you or I said, we never met any robbers. Therefore, there are none. I have 2 pieces of evidence that witchcraft exists. First, the scripture mentions witchcraft. Secondly, many people have experienced the horrors of witchcraft. All right, well, I don't know about the rest of you, but that doesn't sound like great evidence for the existence of witches. He says, well, people say we've never seen any witches, so therefore they don't exist. Yeah, that's how logic works. I can't just say unicorns exist, they're real. And when you rightly say to me, well, nobody's ever seen a unicorn, so how can you say they're real? I can't then turn around and go, well, you can't prove that they don't exist. That's not logical. The burden of proof isn't on me to prove that something exists. If you say something exists, you have to prove it. So that's not good logic by Cotton Mather there. Then he goes on to say, the Bible mentions witchcraft. Okay, well, these are extremely religious people. I get how they're going to use the Bible as evidence, so I'm not even going to argue with that. With that said, whether you've read the Bible or not, or you're religious or not, I think in 2020, most people agree that not everything in a religious scripture is literal. It's not exactly it's not exactly as it's written on the page. Maybe it's more of a metaphor, a message. He goes on to say, secondly, many people have experienced the horrors of witchcraft. Again, how do we know that? Like, because somebody said so? Okay, I was abducted by aliens, so aliens definitely exist. Do you know what I mean? That's just sort of like, it's not real concrete evidence. And yet Cotton Mather says, well, I'll prove it. It's not really proof. So, all right, fine. That's what the first bit of evidence says. Okay. Let's move on to document B. The testimony of Abigail Hobbs. Below is the testimony of a teenager accused of witchcraft, Abigail Hobbs, on April 19th, 1692. All right, let's see what she says. Well, actually, this is a back and forth between the judge and Abigail Hobbs, so I'll go back and forth. Judge. Abigail Hobbs, you are brought before the authority to answer to various acts of witchcraft. What say you? Are you guilty or not? Speak the truth. Abigail Hobbs. I will speak the truth. I have seen sights and been scared. I have been very wicked. I hope I shall be better, if God will help me. Judge. What sights did you see? Abigail Hobbs. I have seen the devil. Judge. How often? Many times. Abigail. But once. Judge. What would he have you do? Abigail. Why, he would have me be a witch. Judge. Would he have you make a covenant with him? Abigail Hobbs. Yes. All right, so I don't know about the rest of you. Abigail Hobbs saying that she is convinced that this happened, I'm not sure I buy it. This sounds like a scared teenager who's saying what she thinks the adults want to hear so she doesn't get in trouble. If you look at what she's talking about, she says, "Oh, the devil would have me be a witch." She's putting the blame on the devil, not herself. And so that, to me, doesn't seem like real evidence of witchcraft. It just seems like a scared teenager who's trying to get out of trouble, which, we've all been there. So I'm not so sure that this is great evidence to prove it. But our question is, what caused the Salem witch crisis? Possibly these girls, Abigail Hobbs being one of them, could feel like they were playing a game. They were doing something small, and then it snowballed. It got really big. And then that game became deadly, and people started to die, and people started to question everything, and people started to be accused of witchcraft. And this girl, like many of the other girls, is afraid of what might happen to her if people find out she was lying or that this was a little game. So that's how that rubs me. Let's take a look at Document C, Salem Evidence C, Chart of Family Farms. Now this is interesting. This is a chart. It tells us the average size of a family farm in Salem Village from 1640 to 1700. Okay. Now remember, the Salem witch trials happen in 1692, and they point that out on the graph. That's what that arrow leads to. Now let's look at the axis. See the axis where it says acres and it goes from 0 to 300? Okay? That's the size of a farm. Okay, so the more acres, the bigger the farm is. And then if we look at the bottom axis, I think that's the x-axis, forgive me if I'm wrong, it goes from the years, I would assume 1630, all the way to 1700 and I guess beyond. So what can we see over time? Well, if you look at around 1640, it says the average family farm in Salem Village was between 150 to 200 acres in size. By 1660, it's up to 250. So that means farms were getting bigger over this time in Salem. Okay, fine. Sounds good. If farms are getting bigger, that means there's more crops, there's more food for people, there's more money for those farmers. All sounds good. And then it starts to take a tumble, and it declines sharply. Farms go from, in the 1660s, 250 acres down to, in 1690, less than where they were in 1640. Roughly about, let's say, 125 acres. So that's a pretty big drop. Notice that the Salem witchcraft trials happen during that decline. Okay, so what does that tell us? Well, if the farms are getting smaller and then the Salem witch trials happen, it tells me that the life of farmers, and therefore the life of everybody else, because farmers feed Salem and the world, it tells me that as the farms were getting smaller and worse, that these witch trials happened during that time. Now, does that mean that they're related? Not necessarily, but they do correlate. And there is a possibility that because farms were getting smaller over time, that these families might have had a reason to blame others for witchcraft. Now, I don't really have an answer to that, and that's part of history, is that we don't really know. But I don't find this a coincidence. Why would farmers, as their farms are getting smaller, want to accuse people of witchcraft? Well, what makes their farms get smaller? Maybe they are competing with other people for land. Maybe they're competing with other businesses. Maybe when times got tough, the bank said, hey, we're pulling the mortgage on your farm. We don't want to give you a mortgage. We're going to instead invest in this other person in Salem. That could be a possibility. So there's every chance that this decrease in the size of family farms led to the Salem witch trials, in that the farmers are very angry at some people. Now, if that didn't make a ton of sense to you, that's okay, because now I think it will. Let's move to document D. See, document D goes with document C. Take a look. The map below depicts Salem Village on the left, meaning the west, and Salem Town on the right, which is the east. Most people in Salem Village were farmers, whereas most people in Salem Town were merchants and townspeople. The residents of Salem Village had to pay taxes to Salem Town. The map shows that most of the people who made accusations were from Salem Village. Oh, wait a second. That's an important line. The residents of Salem Village had to pay taxes to Salem Town. Okay. So Salem Town is in the east here, or on the right, and Salem Village is on the left, which is the west. Okay, most of the people who made the accusations were from Salem Village. Now, Salem Village, that's where the farmers were from, and if we look back at document C, that's where their farms were getting smaller. If you take a look at this, we have a little key here on this map. An A means an accuser, a D means a defendant, and a W with a circle around it means an accused witch. Well, when we look at the map, most of the accused witches and most of the defenders are in Salem Town, and almost all of the accusers are in Salem Village, which leads me to believe that document C was not a coincidence. Because the people of Salem Village were seeing their farms get smaller, they resented the people of Salem Town, and they blamed them for that. And part of them thought, all right, we'll get back at them. We'll accuse them of being witches, and we'll take them out of the picture. That's what they get for messing with the size of our farms. That is some freaky stuff, man. I don't think it was actual witchcraft. It sounds like witchcraft was used as an excuse for the people of Salem Village to get back at the people of Salem Town. But if you read documents A and B, it sounds like that was only successful because, as document A shows us, the Puritans were obsessed with the literal interpretation of the Bible, and that the Puritans were paranoid about witchcraft and the devil. And then document B shows us that there was this fear amongst the people in the town. That young girl, Abigail Hobbs, she's willing to lie and say she made a covenant with the devil and she was willing to become a witch. And she's willing to confess to that as long as she doesn't get in trouble, because, lying about that is probably worse than saying it. And so she lies about it and says it because she fears being punished. So this is really crazy. So ultimately, take all this. What do you think caused it? I've included a video that has a lot of details. What do you think caused the Salem witch crisis? Tell me in about 14 to 20 sentences. Use these documents. Don't be afraid to quote them. Don't be afraid to explain them. And give this to me by next Tuesday. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. And go through this video again if you need to. Go through the documents again. And I really suggest you watch the video documentary that I added. It's on Daily Motion. I included the link in the Google Class description. I would watch that because I think that'll tell you a lot about it. It sounds like to me these girls started something, and then the adults continued the lie to get back at the people of Salem Village. But the lie only works because the Puritans were so paranoid about witchcraft and angering God. So that does it for today. If you guys have any questions, email me, let me know on Google Classroom, and this is due on Tuesday.